Okay, so we're actually going to start our webinar. Sage 200 credit control features. It's actually going to be split into 3 parts this morning. We're going to be looking at setting up your credit controls, and by that I mean how to go in your settings, set up your aging periods, your credit limits and your individual payment terms for your customers. The second part will be looking at the standard Sage inquiries and reports. So things like your debtors report, your due date report, and all the screen inquiries that will help you have visibility of the debt that's owed to you. And the final section really is going to be how we deal and handle customer debt. So that's going to cover producing the paper or electronic statements for customers, produce your debt chasing letters, how to generate finance charges, how to put a customer on hold, and finally how to write off a bad debt and reclaim the VAT for those customers you know will never pay you. Okay, so let's go into Sage 200 and start having a look at some of the settings. Now, first of all, on my sales ledger, I've got the list view in front of me, and I've added a couple of columns which I think would be of interest for this particular topic. So, for example, the statement production, how do we want to produce our statements, whether that be by post or by email? What's the average time it takes for our customers to pay us? And that's automatically calculated as we allocate receipts against invoices. It will automatically calculate the average time to pay for that particular customer. I've also added our next credit review date as a column on the screen in front of us. So first of all, let's have a little look at some of the settings within credit control. Within our sales ledger utilities and ledger setup, we have ledger settings. We have an aging tab, and in here we can define the number of periods we want to age our debt over. It can be up to a maximum of 8 periods, and you define the number of days that each period will cover. And that will determine the age of the debt that's going to be produced on your age debt reports and on your statements. We also define on this tab the default payment terms for our customers. So we can enter any number of days, and it can be either calendar monthly, from the start of month, end of month, or from document date. Now that's just a default, and we can actually change that for each individual customer. So if I just go into a customer account, and if I go into their payment tab, you can see here that's the default, 30 days from document date, but I have the ability to change the number of days and the base sort of starting point for each customer individually. Sorry. We can also define a credit limit as well for our customers, and that's on an individual basis. There's no default. That is set up for each customer individually. A 0 credit limit is unlimited credit, so if you really want to limit your customer to virtually nothing, then you should really just pop a £1 in there, and that will mean that all your sales orders will go on hold as you enter those orders, because it'll take them over their credit limit. The other thing that I want to show you, and this isn't used by very many people, but it's very, very powerful, is within our processing tab in our settings, we can set up finance charges for our processing. We can set up to a maximum of 20 finance charges, and we can apply those different charge rates to customers individually. So within our settings, we can specify our aging periods, we can set up the default payment terms on the sales ledger, we can set up credit limits for each of the customers, and we can also set up finance charges on the sales ledger settings processing tab. So let's have a little look at how we can have visibility of what is actually owed to us. Now, first of all, as I mentioned on my list view, I've got the balance, and I can sort by any of the columns. So I can sort by the balance, and I can highlight any of the top 10, top 20 that I want to be processing and looking at. Within the sales inquiries, we have all these inquiries available to us. So we have a transaction inquiry. So I can select any of my customer accounts, and I can see on an individual basis all the outstanding transactions. By default, I'm only seeing the outstanding transactions because this option is ticked here, which is show outstanding only. If I want to see everything, I can just untick that or tick it back on as appropriate. At the bottom half of the screen, then, we have the drill down. So we have the transaction detail that shows us the values of that particular transaction. But what's very important is we have this Memo tab. And if I add a memo, we can put any transaction onto a query. And we can just type in a text, so query price, for example. And then you'll see on our memo column here, we've got an A there because that's telling me that there's an active memo for that particular transaction. So when any other user comes into this account and looks at the transaction listing, they will see that there's an active memo and they can drill down to see what that memo actually contains. We have a choice then. We can choose to set it as inactive, which means that that flag is now changed from an A to an I for inactive. We could choose to delete it completely. If I go to my account inquiry, okay, we also have a memo tab for the account as a whole. And again, we can see the history of that particular memo as it's been sort of generated over time. So we can see that in March 2014, Andrew Lowe was set as the primary contact. In March 2014, again, there was discussion about credit rating. To see the full memo text, we just tick on the button at the bottom and we can actually see the full text that's been typed in for that particular memo. To add a new memo, I just click on Add, type in my text, so check in post. And as soon as I say OK, you'll see that it's date and time stamped. It'll record the user that entered that memo, and we can see the text that's assigned to that particular memo as well. So we can actually have a full history of all the memos, discussions that have taken place with that particular account, right down to the individual transaction level. The transaction inquiry went into, we drilled into the account inquiry, but you can go directly into the account inquiry using that option as opposed to drilling through to that. But we also have some workspaces available to us. Where we've got the square icon, that's a standard Sage 200 screen inquiry. Where we have the globe icon, that's a workspace which is a different way of working. Now there is a credit control workspace, and this will only show customers that have a balance outstanding. And from here we can do a number of actions. So first of all, let's explain what we can see on the screen in front of us. So by default, we are looking at all of our customers. We can sort by any of the columns. So maybe we want to sort by code as opposed to balance and want to work our way through the accounts. If I select any of my accounts, the bottom half of the screen is showing me the outstanding sales transaction listing. So I can see the transaction type, the transaction date, the due dates, the overdue days, so on and so forth. We can change our sizing so we can see more information that's on the screen. If I go back from here, we can choose to record a receipt. So when we're actually sort of in this particular workspace, there are a number of actions available to us. So we can record a receipt, or we could record a payment. We can export the data, we can print it, and we can refresh the data. The right-hand side of the screen here is showing me the transaction detail. Sorry, someone's just come in. I think there may be a problem. Sorry. I think, can we just check that people can see my screen now? I apologize. I think there may have been a problem with not being able to see my screen. Yeah, okay. Right, apologies for that, everyone. I'm going to start again. There was a problem with sharing my screen. That's now. Let's start again. Okay then, so very quickly we went through the settings. So I'm just going to go through and show you the screens to do those settings. So in my sales ledger utilities, my ledger setup, we have ledger settings. And it's through this screen that we've got our aging tab where we define the number of periods up to a maximum of 8 periods, the number of days for each of those periods, and our default payment terms for our customers. Bear in mind these are just defaults and they can be changed on an account-by-account basis. We have our processing tab, and it's through here that we define our finance charge rates up to a maximum of 20 different finance charge rates. If I go back to my customer list view, and if I just sort by code, If I amend an account, it is on our account that we can determine the specific payment terms for our customer accounts. So in this example, it's 30 days from document date, but that can be changed to calendar monthly, start of month, end of month, or document dates, and any number of days. Also on the Company tab, that's where we define our credit limit, whereby a zero credit limit is an unlimited credit limit. So if you want a minimal credit, just pop £1 in there and then your sales orders will automatically go on hold. Okay, so those were the screens that we went through to set up your aging periods, the default payment terms, your credit limits, and your finance charges. We then started to go on to the credit control inquiries. So I went into sales inquiries, and we have all these inquiries options on our menu in front of us. It is the square icon that takes you into the standard Sage 200 inquiry screens, and the globe icon will take you into Workspaces. So when I go into my transaction inquiry, I can select an account, and I can see in my memo column here that there's an inactive memo for this particular transaction. So I can drill down into the memo for that particular transaction, and I can see that there was a query regarding the price on that particular item. It's now inactive, so that's a decision that needs to be made as to how that's going to be processed. To add a memo to a transaction, you just highlight the transaction and select Add, say Query Re-Quality, and by default it's A for active. So to make it inactive, we just click Set as Inactive, or we can delete it. So if I set it as inactive, that's now changed it from an A to an I. To set it as active again, I just changed that. It's now gone from an I to an A. So we can set memos on individual transactions. Now you can also use the query flag, so you can use any letters of the alphabet that determine or have some relevance to you. Now the difference between your query and your memo is the memo is purely text. It's not going to stop you processing at all. Your query flag, however, is a more hard-coded query flag. So if a transaction has a query against it, you won't be able to receive money against that particular invoice. It's like putting it on hold, really. You need to remove the query flag before you can actually allocate a receipt against that particular transaction. So to put the query flag on, you just type in the query flag, and to remove it, you just press the delete key, and then that query flag has been removed. Now from here, I'm drilling up into the account inquiry. However, this will take us into the account inquiry screen that we've got on our menu just underneath the transaction inquiry and in sales inquiries. If I click on account inquiry, I can see that there's a star in my memo tab. And if I select that, I can see that there's a history of memos that have been entered for this particular account. So there was a discussion about credit rating. Andrew Lowe has been set as the primary contact, and today I've been promised that there's a check in the post. This means that next time that I come in, I can see who entered that particular memo, the date and time that it was entered, and ensure that it's actually been resolved. Now we can't see the full memo text by default. There is a button here, Show Memo Text, and that will expand the screen so we can see the full memo text that's been entered at that particular time. Okay. There's also a Debtors Reconciliation inquiry screen. Okay, we select the periods that we want to be looking at, and what this will do is just ensure that we balance to the nominal ledger. So it isn't really to do with credit control as such, but it's just another inquiry that I just wanted to mention. And what this will do is show you your opening balance at the beginning of the selected accounting period, show you all changes from the sales ledger, all changes from the nominal ledger, and it'll just highlight if there's a discrepancy. And the reason that we've got these particular options is because this is where if the sales ledger doesn't balance to the nominal ledger, it's usually because maybe an opening balance has been entered or manual journals have been entered directly into the nominal ledger account. So by selecting any of our changes or any of the lines, we can see the transaction behind that, and that will identify where the imbalance may lay. Now, the square icons denote the standard Sage 200 screen inquiries, whereas the globe icon denote Workspaces. Workspaces are quite a new phenomenon, and it's a different way of working within Sage 200. The beauty of Workspaces, they can be accessed via your remote web users, whereas the standard screen inquiries can't be. So there is an inquiry there called Credit Control. So if I go into my Credit Control workspace, it will bring up a screen that is much different to the standard screen inquiries. On the screen in front of us, what we have is a list of all our customers that actually have a balance associated with them. So it's only going to focus on those customers that actually owe us money. We can sort our workspaces by any of the columns, whether it be a code or by balance or by credit limit. And we can also filter as well by typing in some text. So maybe I'm looking for company. So type in COM, and anything that has that text within that field will be displayed. We can also set up filters. So maybe I only want to look at balances that are greater than £50,000. By setting up a filter, I can again reduce the view that I have on the screen in front of me and focus on the data that's important to me. We can remove it by just selecting no filtering. The bottom half of the screen is showing me the outstanding current sales transactions. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I have by default the customer detail. So I have the customer name, the currency, and if I select Abbey Retail, that will change to reflect that data. I have the telephone numbers. I can change that view. So maybe I want to look at the contacts. I want to ring this particular customer. So just by scrolling to the right, I can see that Hayley is my main contact there, so I can call her with regard to the outstanding transactions. We can also perform actions from within here. So at the top of the screen here, we have these buttons. So if I select Abbey Retail, I could choose to amend the account details, and that will take me into the standard amend customer details for that particular customer. We also have other actions available to us. So we could enter transactions. So when we want to enter a credit note or record a receipt, we can go to sales accounts and maybe want to amend the account details and change their credit limit. We can go to inquiries and go to the standard Sage account inquiry or transaction inquiry. So from within the credit control screen, we've got a lot of actions available to us. We can also run reports, our credit control reports, maybe a due date report or account details report. We can export the data, print it, and refresh our screen. At the bottom half of the screen here, as I mentioned, we have the sales transaction listing. So by highlighting any of the transactions, okay, again, we've got actions available to us. So what we can do is we can record a receipt against that particular transaction, or we could export the data, print it out, and refresh the screen. So it's a different way of working. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it can be a very, very powerful tool when it comes to managing your debt and your customers. Now, as well as inquiries, we have the standard Sage reports. I'm just going to focus on our credit control reports, and there are a number of options available to us. First of all, we have our aged debtors report. So hopefully everybody's running that on a monthly basis and balancing that to your nominal ledger. So what we can do is actually select this criteria. Now, for the purpose of today's demonstration, I'm actually just looking at my accounts for my A's and B accounts. So I'm just going to run those accounts in my debtors report. It is possible to run a retrospective report, so we can just tick retrospective and we can say, well, what was my debt as of the end of May? And what that will do is it'll look at the transactions that have been entered since that date, and if they've been sort of allocated, it'll take them on or off depending what the transaction type is. So you can get a true picture of what that aged debt was at that point in time. We can also choose the aging method for this report, whether that be transaction date or calendar monthly. Just going to say OK to that. So what I see now is my sales ledger aged debt report. It gives me my account details, and then it gives me a list of all my outstanding transactions individually with the age of those transactions shown individually. I'm just going to go back to my customer list because I like that view. As well as a detailed aged debtors report, we have a summary aged debtors report. Now if I were to run that, again, I can just run it for a selection of accounts, or all my accounts would be the norm really as your month-end balancing option. Again, it can be run retrospectively, and again, we can choose an aging method. Okay, and this time we get one line per account, just showing the total age of the debt in its entirety. It's not broken down on a transaction by transaction basis. Now, as well as our age debt reports, we also have due date reports and time taken to pay. Both of these can be useful, so if I were to run my due date report for those accounts, and OK, what this is showing us that all the transactions outstanding with, as it says on the tin, the due date, showing us the age of the debt on our furthest column to the right. The summary due date report is very similar, but instead of, sorry, if I just run this for my same accounts, and OK, but instead of showing all the individual transactions, it's actually showing us the total age of the debt broken down on a month-by-month basis according to our terms that we've set up. Finally, we have the time taken to pay our sales, time taken to pay sales invoices. And this can be useful to identifying those accounts that are actually quite slow in settling their debt. I just say OK to that. This shows us for each account, each individual transaction and the days it's taken them to pay, and it also calculates the average days that it's taken to pay those transactions. However, on the screen in front of me, I've added a column that says average time to pay, and I can sort by that column, so I can see those customers that take a long time to pay. Those are the ones that I need to keep on top of and keep chasing to get regular payment from them. Okay, so we've looked at the setting up the credit controls. We've looked at our credit control inquiries, putting our memos onto the account and to individual transactions. We've looked at the standard account inquiry and transaction inquiry. We've also looked at the standard reports, our debtors summary and detailed, our due date report summary and detailed, and also the time taken report to manage those customers that are slower payers than others. What I want to do now is at handling customer debt. There's a few areas that I want to cover. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at statements. You can produce statements to send to customers as part of your company's credit control procedures, and statements are usually issued regularly in the normal process of reclaiming your debt, but you can print them at any time. You don't have to wait to the end of the month. You don't have to print them for everybody. You can print them for individual customers as you're chasing them up throughout the month. What I want to show you first of all here, again, I've added to my screen a column that's called Statement Production. If I go to Amend an Account and I go to Documents, you'll see that you can have these different options of statement production. You can send them via paper, or you can send them via email. You can have a standard layout and you can have an alternative layout. So for those customers that you want to send their statements via email, you would select Email Standard, and those that you wanted to print out and send them in an envelope, you would select Paper Standard or Alternative. Okay. At the bottom of the screen here as well, we also have Head Office Status. Now, this particular customer, for Abbey Retail, they're an independent customer. Let's have a little look at Quality Counts. If I amend that account and I go to the Documents tab, you'll see that they're going to get their statements in a paper format, and they're a head office account. If we look at Cook's Cookers, again, I'm going to go to the Documents tab. You'll see again it's going to be paper standard. However, this is a branch of BIR 001, and this particular customer is not going to get a statement themselves. The statement is going to go directly to the branch account. The next account, if I look at the Documents tab there, Again, paper standard. Again, it's a branch of the BIR 001, but we're going to produce the statement for the customer. So the two statements will be produced for King's Standing Kitchens, one that's going to be delivered to the branch and one that's going to be delivered directly to the customer. So there's a number of options there. First of all, to the format of the actual statement production, whether it's paper or email, standard layout or alternative layout. And secondly, where is that statement going to be delivered? It's going to be delivered to the branch, to the head office, or is it an independent company, in which case all statements will go to them. You also have the option to opt out of sending statements to customers. So for independents or head office, you can just select no statement option, and that means when you do your statement run for all customers, those customers will not get a statement printed out for them. So let's have a little look at running our statements. So again, in our sales ledger reports and credit control, we have statements. We can choose whether we want to send the statements to both printer and email, or whether we just want to print all those statements to the printer. We can also run them retrospectively. So I could say I want to produce my statements as of the 31st of May, or whatever date I'm actually wanting to look at. Let's just run that. And again, we get the same criteria available to us. So I'm going to select my range of accounts, so my A's and my B's. And I'm going to say OK. So this is going to fire off my paper statements and my email statements, my branch copies and my head office copies. It's just running through the process now. It's sending my email statements directly to email, and a message comes up to that effect. So I'm going to say OK to that. So let's have a little look at the emails and see what's happened. So here we have our statement. So my emails are ready to go. That's just a setting when you're setting up the report as to whether you want to go to draft or whether you want to send them directly out to the customer. I've stopped them at this point so we can actually view the information. You can see that the email address is defaulted to the email address for that particular company. It's attached it as HTML. It can be defined as a PDF. Again, that's just something that you set within the settings within the document itself. I will touch on that briefly in just a moment. So this can be emailed to our customer, and this is what the customer will see. Okay, so first of all, Abbey Retail gets an email statement, but also, we've got a statement for Better Kitchens. Okay, so that's an email statement going out to those particular customers. Let's go back to Sage 200. So this is our branch copy of the statement that are going out. So King's Standing Kitchens, hopefully you can remember we had ticked the option to say that this customer wants to get a copy of their statement. So this statement is going to go to that branch in a paper format. We've also got our standard statement layout, and here we have Quality Count Kitchens that are getting their statement. And if I just scroll down a little bit, Quality Counts Kitchens are also getting a copy of the statement for Cookers Company, because we defined in our settings that the head office was going to get the statement for this particular company. Cookers will not be getting their own layout, their own statement, because we didn't tick that option. So there's a lot of flexibility there as to what you want to print and how you want to send it and where you want to send it to. Now those settings that we looked at, so again if I go back to amend our account, go to my documents, and these options here, that's only relevant to your statements. When it comes to printing your debtors' letters, that is not taken into consideration at all. A debtors' letter is produced for each individual customer, regardless of whether they are independent, a head office, or a branch. The letters are amendable. They're amendable by yourselves, and they will be produced based on the age of the oldest debt for a company. So if a company has a transaction that's dated 2015 and a transaction that's dated 2016, they will get, that's outstanding, they will get the letter associated with the oldest dated transaction. So let's run them first and try and explain a little more clearer what I mean. So again, I'm going to select my A's and B's customers. This process is going to read through all of our accounts. It's going to look at the age of all the transactions on those accounts, and it's going to produce the letter associated with the eldest debt. So here we have Abbey Retail, for example. They have transactions that are dated 2015. So they're getting, if you see at the top here, debtor letter period 4. It's a very old debt, so the wording on this is sort of threatening legal action. Now, as I mentioned, you can amend the content of those letters. You can go into your report designer and open up the debtor letter period 4, save it into your customized layouts folder, and then that will be picked up. Within 2015 and further and more future versions, when you're in a spool file, you have this edit button available to you. And from here, you can click on edit, and it will open up the Sage Report Designer with that layout already selected for you. Excuse me. It's going to take just a moment. It won't take too long. Okay, so we now have all the functionality of the Report Designer available to us. So we can add text, we can add pictures, we can add additional fields, we can change the font, so on and so forth. So if I were to just change this so it reads, add some text, please quote reference on all correspondence. Okay, all I do now is file and save that. Okay, into my custom area. And yes, I'm going to replace it. Okay, so next time I run my letters, so I'm going to just close that. You can also see we have debtor letter period 2. I will just point that out as well, because this particular customer, their latest or the latest due for payment transaction is dated 2016, May 2016. So they're valid for debtor letter period 2. You can have any number of letters to match the same number of periods that you have in your settings, your aged periods. So as I mentioned, a maximum of 8 periods available to you from your aging tab, maximum of 8 letters available to match each of those periods. So let's run my debtors letters again for the same accounts. Okay. And we can see now that the revised version has immediately been actioned. So we now have that text showing on our debtor's letter. Okay. Now it is possible to email any documents. You do have this email option here, but it's slightly different to your statements. With statements, you could have an email statement layout and you could have a paper statement layout. It doesn't work the same way for your letters. We can email this, but if there's no email address associated with this letter, it will just go to a blank email address. Which if I show you now, okie-dokie, if I go to my draft, so I've just maximized this. Okay. There was no email address associated with that particular account, so I would manually input that within the email itself, which is fine if you're just doing 1 letter or 2 letters, but if you're doing a run, you'd have to open up each of these letters individually to see which one was associated with which account. Okie dokie. Now I have mentioned finance charges, and there is a routine to run for your finance charges. It's not used greatly, but it is quite a powerful tool, even if it just gets your customers to think about the debt that they actually they're owing to you. And it is possible to reverse the finance charge as well. So it's not sort of written in stone. It's something you could run at the end of the month, do your statements, have the conversation with customers, and you can remove it after you've had that conversation and been promised payment. Within period end routines, okay, there's an option there, finance charges. You want to apply finance charges, and it's through this option you can reverse it as well. Charge date to appear on the invoice and include invoices with the due date up to a specific date. And why haven't I got anything showing there? Right, sorry about this. I'll be retail. Let's just amend that account. Get it, finance charges. Lovely, lovely. Oh, it's not gone very well today, has it? I do apologise. Let's have a look at their transaction inquiries, look at the dates. Okay, so not 15 on there. Close. Finance charges. Yay, okay, I was just in the wrong period. Great, okie dokes. So the reason that didn't show is because in my accounting periods, I'm still in 2015 financial year, so I'm just having to work with the demo data. So this is now showing me all the transactions that meet that particular criteria. I can be specific and just select individual transactions that I want to incorporate finance charges on, or have the option to select everything. We've also can limit what we see on the screen by date range, customer range, and finance charge rate. So I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to generate the finance charge. That's going to be dated the 31st of December. I get a report that tells me the total amount that's going to be charged as finance. Let's have a little look at that customer. I'll just refresh my screen here. Go to my transaction inquiry. Here you can see all of those finance charge invoice transactions showing on that particular account. When I produce my statement, those finance charges will be printed out and reported to the customer. To remove any of the finance charges, okay, we just select those that we want to reverse. So click reverse finance charge. Again, we could select everything or we can be specific. And now if I generate the reverse finance charges, again, it will produce a report of our finance charge reverses. And now if we have a little look at our customer account, those finance charges are no longer visible because they have been credited. I go to my allocation with the associated credit notes that we've just generated through the reversal. So we have the finance charges, we have the charge reversal as well. It's also possible to charge compound interest as well if you want to on your finance charges, but I'm not sure who can get away with that. Okie dokes. Within our customer account, we can have a hold status. We literally just select customer account status, and it's just to toggle on or off whether we put the customer on hold or not. If we put a customer on hold, we cannot process any transactions at all for this customer. We can't enter orders, we can't enter invoices, we can't even enter receipts. The only transactions that will be processed are any cash book, standing orders or direct debits that you have set up for this customer. They will be processed as normal when you run the cash book, standing orders and direct debits. But apart from that, when you pop an account on hold, you're basically saying we're going to stop trading with this particular customer. It's also asking me if I want to place my live orders on hold, so I can feed that through to my sales orders, so there's no possibility of actually processing those orders. So I'm going to say no for now, and I'm going to say yes to this. This is asking me if I want to review the sales order statuses, which is the same as if I press this review order statuses button here. If I say yes to that, I can see all the sales orders, and I can then individually choose if I want to pop the sales order on hold, or if I want to view the order from within this screen. So by changing the customer status, I've got the possibility of feeding that through to any outstanding sales orders on the system for that customer. Okay, now finally what I want to show you is how to actually write off a bad debt and reclaim the VAT for those customers you know will never pay you. What we have available to us are these options here, provisions for bad debt and write off bad debt as well. So if I go to my provision for bad debt, I can select a customer. Oh, I'm going to say yes, forgot they were on hold. We'll take them off hold. I'll do that first. I forgot to mention actually to take them off hold, it is literally just a tick. So it's a toggle on or off for the account status on hold. Right, let's go back to our provisions for bad debts. We select our customer. We see all the outstanding transactions for that particular account. And you can make a provision, but on a transaction-by-transaction basis. So you can't select everything and make a provision for everything. It does work on an individual basis. So I'm going to select our the newest transaction, because it's May here, and make a provision. The nominal analysis is automatically picked up from the defaults you have set up within your default nominal codes. So it's going to pick up your bad debts provision account. In our example here, it's 14,400, and on the balance sheet, but also the bad debts on your P&L account, which is 68,100 in our example here. It will pick up the cost center and department that you've associated with that particular customer as well. So you need to ensure that you have your P&L account set up for all combinations of your cost centers and departments for your customer accounts. Okay, so if you notice, there's now a query here, so of W, which is write off. So if I close that and again go and have a little look at the transactions for that particular account, you'll see there's a query flag there of W for that account, which means again we cannot allocate any receipts against that particular transaction. If I go to my account inquiry and I go to General, you see here the default nominal code for this particular customer account is 31100, cost center SAL, department BES. The cost center and department is the one I'm talking about, which will default for the P&L bad debt provision. Okay, you can amend provisions for bad debt at any point in time. So if I go back into my customer, I could choose to correct the provision. And if I say OK, it would reverse the posting that we generated earlier on. Or I could choose to make a provision for any other transaction. The waiting period to reclaim your VAT on bad debts, I think is currently set at 6 months, but don't quote me on that. That is set within your settings in the sales ledger. And this write-off bad debt will allow you to select transactions that meet that particular criteria. So I might say I want to look at all transactions. And in fact, because I'll just go into this ledger settings and processing defaults here. That's where we have the waiting period of recovery for VAT on bad debts. That's where you set it to the number of months that you need to wait to reclaim your VAT. Okay, if I go back to my provisions, sorry, for Abby, and just check what we've got set in there. Okay, that's fine. Let's do write-off bad debt. Single customer, Abby. Right, okie dokie. we have the option to actually write off a bad debt, not only for the provision, but for any other transaction that's outstanding for that particular customer. And in this screen, we can, in fact, select everything. We can, however, limit the display, so we're only displaying provisions on this screen. We select our provisions, and now we can select write off. Okay, so if I select write off, okay, and close that. If we now have a little look at our transaction inquiry for Abbey Retail, okay, you'll see that a write-off credit note has automatically been generated, which, if I have a little look at the allocation, has been allocated against that invoice for which we made a provision. Okay, so as well as writing off that debt, it will have written that VAT value to our VAT transactions and be available for processing in our VAT return. Okay, now that brings us to the end of the Managed Customer Debt sort of webinar this morning. Apologies again for that technical hitch first thing, but hopefully we caught up and you could sort of see where I was and where we went from that point on. But just a quick review, we had a little look at setting up your credit controls, so your aging periods, payment terms, credit limits and finance charges. We had a look at our inquiries and workspaces. We looked at memos on accounts and transactions, and we looked at the standard debtors due date and time taken reports. We then had a little look at handling customer debt, producing paper and electronic statements, debt chasing letters, generating finance charges, customer health status, and finally writing off bad debts and reclaiming the VAT. So I thank you for your time. Any further questions, I'll review all those questions now and get back to anybody that has anything outstanding. But if you want to get in touch with me after this, please contact me on the email address that's associated with the webinar, and I'll respond to you as soon as I can. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.